you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Oh boy. So hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News, your weekly, soon to be bi-weekly again, geopolitical live stream. We're also working to try to turn this into a podcast as well. Anyways, that was President Trump crashing out in front of Marine One on his way to a NATO summit earlier this morning. He rarely drops F-bombs, so it seems like he's coming up against the reality that you can't control the foreign policy of warring nations via Truth Social posts. Turns out a lot more lobbying is going to be required for that Nobel Peace Prize, which he covets. So anyways, the 12-day war, which now expands into its 13th day, tentatively, has sent shockwaves through a region already reeling from nearly 2 years of historic volatility and violence beginning in earnest on October 2023. President Trump's Operation Midnight Hammer to destroy Iranian nuclear hard sites brought the U.S. to the precipice of a major conflict that 4 previous presidents had sought to avoid. Iran responded with a symbolic and telegraphed attack on U.S. Al-Udeid Airbase in Qatar with no damage done to U.S. personnel and material. The hope was after this response, Trump would dismiss the attack as weak, declare total victory, and set the stage for a broader regional ceasefire. However, according to Axios reporting from earlier, quote, Trump's effort to end the war began in earnest on Saturday, shortly after the U.S. B-2 bombers launched 14 massive ordnance penetrators that almost completely destroyed Iran's 3 major nuclear facilities. I will say, as an editorial note, that last point is contested by experts. Continuing, the president instructed envoy Steve Witkoff to communicate to the Iranians his desire to negotiate a deal to end the war, according to a White House official. Iran initially refused to engage and said diplomacy would only be possible after it exacted revenge by striking U.S. targets, a source with direct knowledge said. But on Monday evening, when it became clear that the Iranian strike on Al-Udeid was over, Trump called the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and told him he wanted the war to end. A White House official has said. Netanyahu apparently agreed to the ceasefire and said Israel would not conduct any more strikes as long as Iran stopped launching missiles, the White House official also said. And Trump spoke with the Emir of Qatar, and Vice President Vance spoke with the Qatari Prime Minister, who then relayed the message to Iran to finalize the terms of the ceasefire, including the time it would begin. And all this was going on behind the scenes of all those crazy Truth Social posts, apparently. And there has been intermittent fire and airstrikes back and forth, but after Trump's rant this morning, it seems to be holding as of the time of this recording. Iran seems to have lost most of its air defense and some missile stockpiles, and the Ayatollah is in hiding out in a bunker because, you know, the U.S. and Israel are obviously trying to assassinate him. They've already stated they want a regime change. And in Israel, the political and economic situation continues to degrade. The war is unsustainable for all parties. Meanwhile, Israel will continue to use the distractive political cover to continue the genocidal excoriation of the Gaza Strip. So tonight, we are going to parse through this incredibly complex and dynamic situation. To that end, we are joined by Josephine Guilbeau, former military intelligence officer who's now at the Eisenhower Media Network, a veteran-operated think tank. Thanks so much for coming on. We were talking about how, like, just following this for the past, 2 weeks now, constantly, just like everyone's mentally exhausted at this point.
Absolutely. It's almost like the American people, the people in the Middle East are having whiplash. You know, I have friends that I've been supporting in Gaza that are excited. They think the war is ending. And then 2 hours later, the war is continuing. And meanwhile, no eyes are on them and the situation that they're continuing to endure. And it's literally like we are having whiplash. This is happening. No, it's not. This is happening. No, it's not. And this isn't a strategic foreign policy to have. This is almost like that rinse and repeat. What did we do in Afghanistan? What did we do in Iraq? What did we do in Kuwait, Libya? This is the same thing that we're witnessing again in Iran.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought that up about the Gaza piece, because people aren't really paying attention to them, but some people, the wrong people, absolutely are. Now, this was published earlier in a Jewish news service, hardcore Zionist rag out of Israel. Quote, Israel's leaders seek Gaza refocus. Politicians from right to left said the U.S. declared ceasefire means it's time to bring the fight against Hamas to its resolution. So as of today, Israeli politicians from across the ideological spectrum said that the apparent ceasefire between Iran and Israel was a strategic success that now requires action in Gaza and may portend fresh challenges vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic. So Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi, who belongs to Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party, lauded the historic achievements made against Iran. Not really sure what those achievements are, but basically he's saying the mission in Gaza is not yet complete, and this is the main mission now: eliminating Hamas, returning the hostages, and advancing the immigration plan for Gazans wishing to leave the Strip, he wrote. And then, of course, Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, leader of the religious Zionism party, who basically says, now full force into Gaza, finish the job, destroy Hamas, and retrieve our hostages, and ensure, Hashem willing, many years of security and growth from a position of force for the people of Israel. So, it's basically hard to pay attention to Israel bombing Lebanon while it's invading Syria, while it's annexing the West Bank, while it's committing a genocide in Gaza, while it's waging an existential war of annihilation with Iran. So we're basically like tied hook, line, and sinker to this rogue state. And of course, most of the global South and other global players definitely consider America to be a rogue state as well. I don't know.
The IDF is also posturing along in the West Bank along the Jordanian border. They are releasing video footage of them doing that, anticipating that Jordanian militias or Houthi militias may infiltrate directly into Israel. So they are preparing to defend that area of land. And it just, goes to show that these efforts that Israel continues to decide to do, bombing Iran, continuing to bomb Gaza, is not making Israelis safer. It's not making Americans safer. They are continuing to drag civilians into the death and destruction that they have been causing now for years.
Right. And so you worked at the Defense Intelligence, or contractor at the Defense Intelligence Agency and the NSA. I know from your experience in Washington amongst like defense circles, does it seem like the decision making or the planners actually know what's going on? It seems to me like they're really just making this up on the fly.
Absolutely. What I'm witnessing right now, there is no strategy behind what the American, not military necessarily, but our American politicians are doing. Everything that war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has said thus far, the corrupt politicians have listened to. But now we're seeing, recently an 06 officer from the Pentagon speak out against what's happening in Israel. I have friends who are still active duty, who are still working in the intelligence community, who have increased concern about how Israel is dragging us into this war. And the national security of American citizens is at risk. I'm talking to you about what's happening with the possibilities of militias invading Israel, but that there's a real possibility that we can be victims of cyber attacks or any other attacks. And why wouldn't we be? Our country is literally breaking international laws, bombing the sovereign countries, committing a genocide. We are complicit and enabling the genocide of Palestinian people. How long can we do that before our national security is at risk? And so absolutely, there is a growing concern about the unwavering support that our country is having with Israel, and the fact that there isn't any conversations coming out from these politicians about stopping the weapons flow, stopping Lockheed Martin from manufacturing weapons, stopping these defense contracting companies from creating these weapons. These conversations aren't being had on scale. So it's like the where is the light at the end of the tunnel for when this is going to end? How bad does it need to get before our politicians start listening to the American people, start understanding that strategically this isn't working anymore?
Well, I'm actually surprised that, a rogue actor within the United States hasn't done an attack yet.
So am I.
But now we're seeing, as this Iran situation escalates, that we're seeing all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the new news headlines about Iranian sleeper cells within the United States. And they haven't presented any intelligence or even any think tank pieces. Apparently, Trump left the G7 summit early because he was warned by Iranian officials that if they attack Iran, sleeper cells are going to open up. And that's why he left early. He left early so he could monitor the bombing operation from the Situation Room in the White House. That's why he left early. It wasn't this. So are you concerned also that certain parties within the defense community are kind of manufacturing or ginning up hysteria, like pre-Iraq war hysteria?
Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that there is a real possibility that there are rogue individuals inside of our country that have this growing rage inside, because they have literally been witnessing their people get slaughtered in mass, and this country supporting it. So I'm not going to deny that there is a possibility that someone can say, I have enough, and their mental status, leads them to do some sort of violent action. But at a large scale, no, I don't believe that that is what's happening. I think at the end of the day, what our country is doing and continuing to push this narrative that, everyone don't go and, don't go to the mall. Remember when they used to say that during the Iraqi invasion, like, don't show up in large groups at the mall. Don't go to places where there's, large populations of people. I think this is just to try and convince the American people that what we're doing in Iran and our unwavering support in Israel is necessary. But what that is doing is our unwavering support to Israel is actually further risking our national security, because Iran is not just some third world country in the Middle East. They have access to cyber assets. They can exploit our financial institutions, our water treatment facilities. When I worked at NSA, I did cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. And why did I do that? Because of foreign enemies. And why are they enemies? Because our corrupt politicians create them as enemies. But we protect our water infrastructure, our grid. These are all things that countries like Iran, Russia, North Korea have access to, China have access to. And, war looks different than it did back when we invaded Iraq. Cyber attacks is a phase that is now included in the phases of war. And so what we would witness more than likely is not going to be these sleeper cells popping out and, like suicide bombs, for example, what are explosions or IEDs. What we're going to witness are these either small or large scale cyber attacks. That's what's going to happen first. And that is going to disrupt everyday Americans' lives, because when you attack a water treatment facility that supplies water to thousands and thousands of people, now you're talking about weeks of, boil notices and purchasing water. And that's the type of disruption that Americans are going to feel before we have any sort of large scale attack like 9/11, which, by the way, of course, had everything to do with Israel as well. So what I think is coming is if our corrupt politicians don't start talking about stopping this unwavering support to Israel, we're going to most likely face some sort of cyber attack.
Yeah, either from a state or rogue individuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that would be more effective than, you know, doing like one like violent extremist act like shooting up a mall or something, which we're taught to fear more because it's more like visceral and violent, and it creates moral panics more so than the cyber attacks. And that's kind of like why people, especially amongst like I don't know, like more conspiracy oriented people, are like, oh, here we go, here comes the false flag. And of course, you know, there were pilot programs, especially in the 60s, with Operation like Northwood, to kind of stage terrorist attacks in order to gin up consent for a war against Cuba. I mean, look, we're already committing a genocide, so you know, what wouldn't we do at this point? But
Absolutely.
but seeing this, you know, as someone who used to support the current president a while ago, you still have a lot of people and friends that within the MAGA sphere. And I just kind of want to move this onto the domestic, the home front, and the voter base, his support base. How is all of this? He campaigned on peace through strength, being anti-interventionist, anti-like global transnational security elite. How is this impacting his base? It looks from the outside, you know, from my more left-wing perspective, that it's kind of witnessing some ideological fractures.
Absolutely. You know, the conservative Republicans definitely are on a large divide when it comes to this, because Trump campaigned on promises that he would end the war. You know, when he was campaigning, we were watching this huge war between Ukraine and Russia. You know, thousands and thousands, generations of Ukrainians have been killed, generations of Russians have been killed in that war. And then we were watching the genocide in Gaza, and everything that Trump kept campaigning to his base was that he was going to bring peace. He was going to stop these wars. And not only has he not been able to do either of those, he has now gotten us into another war that is escalating so quickly that we could potentially be looking at a nuclear war. And so, of course, you know, his base are you know, people who I drive around rural Ohio, and they have Trump flags in their front yard, and their homes are falling apart, their cars are falling apart, they're working 100 plus hours to be able to afford to pay their bills, yet they have a president who voted on the fact that he would end wars and invest our money back into our communities and our children. And he's not following through with those campaign promises. So not only are you seeing a divide between the conservative Republicans who voted for a no-war president, you're seeing it amongst the actual politicians. You look at the Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's been very vocal about how she disagrees on what we have participated in bombing Iran.
Right. Yeah. And then Trump, like, another like non-establishment Republican politician would be, or conservative politician would be Thomas Massey. And now the Trump administration has created a PAC, the Kentucky PAC, to primary him and unseat Thomas Massey, because he's been so vocally anti-war and anti-interventionist. So that's definitely happening too. I just wanted to play this clip about Bannon too, because it's being focused on Israel. You know, Bannon, of course, believes Trump is the vehicle by which he will actualize the political change he wants to see in America. So he's always going to frame it as like he supports Trump, and Trump isn't being played, or he's not being deceitful to the American people. He's framing it as Netanyahu lied to Trump.
All, particularly of what this guy did for you and the grief he's taken over here. You had the gall when he said, this is what I've done, and I need you to be a partner. I need you to stand down. First is where I can't stop at all, which is another lie of the many lies we've gotten from the Netanyahu government. A bald-faced lie. Well, then he says, okay, I need you to stand. I can't have any scale. If you can't get some guys back, it's fine. Goes to bed, gets a couple hours sleep, wakes up, and you lied to him. That's why he's furious. That's as mad as I've ever seen the President of the United States. And think about it. How did you get his anger like that, given everything he's done for you and the pressure he's under and a couple hours sleep? Now he's got in a freaking plane and fly for what, 6-8 hours to sit down with this crowd at NATO, which you know he's just wildly enthusiastic about doing that, and plus putting himself going in the air at a time when you're in a shooting conflict in the world, putting his life at risk to do that, and this is what he gets. This is the thanks he gets. Don't sit there and don't glaze him. Netanyahu goes on Israeli TV and glazes him. Don't glaze him. Don't slobber all over him. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So first of all, trying to like humanize the struggle Trump's under. I personally don't feel bad at all, but no, I see what he's trying to do there rhetorically. Where do you see this ending? Because I have a feeling that no matter what, the MAGA base will eventually like do enough mental gymnastics that they'll support him, and based off of the support of him, he won't really change his overriding policies.
I don't know. We witnessed the Democratic Party face a huge divide during the Biden administration when he had this unwavering support for Israel and supporting Benjamin Netanyahu, and he even having him come to the People's House and to the White House. And you had politicians like Senator Sherrod Brown, a career politician of Ohio that was voted out. And that's what's happening to the Republican base right now. This is their moment where they were made these promises, just like Biden made promises to the Democrats, and they had to come to the realization that these promises weren't kept, and that, this is all theatrics to be able to get a vote. Now you have the Republicans that are going through that with Trump as president, realizing that this is theatrics, and, he doesn't actually represent the people and what we want. And so I don't know. I see that this is going to have some long-term effects for sure.
Right. And, I kind of wanted to focus on the domestic issues because, we're starting to realize that there's like no daylight between, foreign policy and domestic policy, especially when it comes to the war and the police state. Even we saw a statement from Customs and Border Patrol that they're on high alert for these Iranian sleeper cells. So even our own law enforcement apparatus, of course, is connected to the war state. ICE was founded, in response to 9/11 as an excuse to like weaponize deportations and stuff like that. So this is all connected. And, when it comes to the exercise of American hard power, we are the empire, and all of these imperial projects generally collapse when people within the imperial core at home are done with it. However, I think I've been thinking about this more philosophically recently. It's like we have been so inculcated into like being at war and existing at war. It's just like what we do. And people just kind of accept it. It's the Middle East. They've always been killing each other. Like these propagandized Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Persian narratives that we grew up with in the GWAT, the Global War on Terror era. I think what was kind of interesting, the first time like people the most vocal people actually started, was not from the liberal Democrats, but was actually from conservatives. So it's kind of bizarre to see these kind of like two thrusts within conservative spaces. You've got like the ideological neoconservatives, a lot of whom are evangelical Zionist Christians, and the more like anti-authoritarian, anti-right people. But it doesn't seem like the anti-war crowd really has access to a lot of political power.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, I don't think any of us have real access to a lot of political power. What AIPAC has done and how deep it has infiltrated inside of our government, not only AIPAC, but you're talking about CPAC. It's all these lobby groups, how far they have infiltrated inside of our government and our officials so that no voice is being heard. I see on the conservative side, I just recently spoke to someone who is a super diehard Republican, MAGA, voted for Trump, would vote for him again, honestly. And she was telling me how upsetting it is for her to see ICE detaining people that have no criminal background, because they push this narrative that the people that they were going to deport from our country were hard criminals, they were gang members, they, chop people's heads off, etc. But we have footage coming out, for example, just recently, the mother of two people who are in the military who went to her green card case, and ICE was there waiting for her. And then you have another active duty Marine Corps what are you calling grunt?
Yeah, grunt. Infantry
The grunt.
grunt, yeah.
Who has a 9-week-old baby, and his wife went to get to her green card appointment, and ICE abducted her, and she's in a detention center, and he's having to drive for her to be able to breastfeed her child. So I think the world is realizing that the narrative that not only the world, I'm sorry, but the conservatives are realizing that the people that they are deporting are not the people that they said that they would. And so this is just another tally of lies that they were told that Trump campaigned he was going to do X and he's not. And so at the end of the day, what I'm thinking is that my voice and your voice is holding little power because of how infiltrated these billionaires are into our politicians. And they're only making each other richer because, as I stated before, you drive down the road in a rural country and someone with a Trump flag, their home is falling apart. They have no health insurance. They hardly see their family because they are working to pay bills month to month. And this is not what the American people wanted. And this is not sustainable. And so at the end of the day, people from both the left and the right are going to have to start uniting together in order to stop the corruption that does exist. And primaries are right around the corner. And if the Democrats could get career politicians out like Sherrod Brown, we can get career politicians out like Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz and Senator Lindsey Graham. And we can keep politicians in like Thomas Massie, who has stood firm to say, we will not support a country who is committing genocide. We must stop weapons to a country that is committing genocide.
Right. And in the meantime, we always have this idea that like Trump, he's motivated by the deal. He's not motivated by like ideology. He that's kind of his entire like identity within politics. He's also very showy. He's an ex-reality TV star. But will he? The question is like, will he ever actually stand up to Netanyahu? We know that he took $100 million from Miriam Adelson, whose one goal in life is to annex the West Bank. He campaigned on ending the war in Russia and Ukraine, ending getting a ceasefire in Gaza, getting a nuclear deal with Iran. Literally everything's collapsed. Do you get the sense that people within his support base are getting disillusioned with his performance and track record? And will he ever stand up to Netanyahu?
I don't know. Whenever Trump won back in January, there was a small piece of me that was optimistic that he would end the wars. I always try and keep some optimism. Now I'm not so sure anymore, because what the reality is, I don't think that the American government as a whole actually holds that kind of power anymore. And I know I've been talking about this for 20 plus months. I have been watching BRICS grow, alliances form in the global south. We're watching Russia, China, and Iran tighten their alliances together. Economically, what it's going to take for Trump to change his mind, because he is moved by money, it's going to have to affect us severely economically, these choices. And so once we start seeing BRICS grow and these alliances form, and the reality that, America's economy is falling, that's when I really feel like our politicians and Trump might start actually saying something. But at the end of the day, we have the military industrial complex, and all of these billionaires have invested into that. And so as long as the war keeps going, they keep making their money. And so at the end of the day, it's hard for Americans to think about a mid to long-term solution to this, because every day we're witnessing something. Within 24 hours, it feels like a year has passed, because so many things are happening inside of our country. There's so much chaos. But if you think about the mid to long-term goals of how we can actually turn this around as American citizens, it's going to start thinking about these primaries that are coming up. It's going to get the younger generation of people who have never voted in their life because they don't trust the system to get out, to register to vote, and start voting these candidates out. Because we cannot have candidates that accept money from foreign lobby groups like AIPAC, or candidates that continue to for 20 years say that they support one thing and everything that they have voted for is something else. And so in my view, the only way we're going to turn this around is if the American people unite together and start voting these candidates out. This is not about party lines. This is not about a Democrat or Republican. I don't even think that exists anymore.
Right. No, I mean, that they definitely want to keep that narrative going, but like, who's really calling the shot? It's these billionaires. Trump is one of them. Steve Witkoff, a lot of his like inner cabinet, they're all oligarch billionaires. And I know like the episode said we were going to like focus like mostly on Iran and stuff, but like this is kind of more relevant because this is more impactful to actual U.S. foreign policy. We're captured by these kind of neoconservative, anarcho-capitalist, techno-feudal overlords like Peter Thiel, who wants to, who founded Palantir, and Alex Karp, who's, basically their same predictive algorithm policing technology is used to level Gaza and destroy entire bloodlines. And, the same kind of software and algorithm is used by ICE. It's called Immigration OS. And now we're going to be all put into this national predictive policing database, which is the biggest expression of the deep state, that I've ever seen. And what these kind of neoconservative guys want is just to be mired in endless war. The CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, says, he wants to essentially wage a 3-front war against like Iran, Russia, and China. And so this is kind of what we're looking at. What they want again is to be mired in endless war. And like when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, he's the perfect kind of guy for that, because this is his overall strategy when it comes to any sort of ceasefire, whether it's with Iran, whether it's with like the Hamas, whether it's with Hezbollah. It's like this. So Israeli officials are reporting that Netanyahu wants to end the war with Iran. All right, that's been all over the news. He said he wanted to seek an end to the war by Friday. This week they added that Israel will immediately accept a ceasefire if Iran proposes it, blah, blah, blah. We've all been tracking this drama unfolding for the past 48 hours. Is Netanyahu just repeating the same playbook as Gaza? Yes. Structurally, it is absolutely the same playbook.
Absolutely, yes. They will not, Netanyahu will not stop waging this instability, death, and destruction against Iran until they have their own puppet master, just like they placed a puppet master in Egypt, just like they did in Jordan, in Lebanon. They will not stop attacking Iran and trying to change the regime in Iran until they complete it. And the only way to stop this is for the American people to and the American government and the German government to stop sending weapons to Israel. That is the only way that they can stop them from continuing down this path to a nuclear weapon. And to go to your point, the increase, militarized society that we're heading down, high schools are now offering Drones 101 as an elective. That tells you that they are preparing our children here in America to be able to be employed by these militarized companies. These are going to be companies that are going to be contracted against the American people. It's not like it's knocking on our doorstep. It is in our home now. This is happening to American citizens. I just got back from Egypt, and what an interesting situation it is there. There are checkpoints everywhere. There are police everywhere. It is militarized. It was terrifying to even talk about Gaza, even in Egypt. And that's what it looks like. A police state looks like. There is no freedom there. And the more that the American people realize that, the more that we can start voting in these politicians that are going to say no. And as much as I don't agree with, Marjorie Taylor Greene on so many things, at the very least, she's actually speaking out about this bill that got brought past the House and now is going in front of the Senate, how, states can't touch AI, federal implementation of AI for 10 years, and she didn't realize that was in the bill. But that is what is coming to the American people. What we are witnessing in Gaza, what we are witnessing in the West Bank, this, surveillance, like the invasion of privacy. You can't walk on this road, you can't go to this store. All of these things are going to come to the American people. And this is not like, I'm not trying to fear monger, but when you look at it's the reality. When you look at a high school schedule and it says drones 101 as an elective, it's like, oh, wow, like this is really here. This strategy that they have to militarize our country, to, invade our privacy and our freedoms it's really here.
No, and it's all connected too. And Larry Ellison, the billionaire oligarch who's also embedded with the Trump administration, the founder of Oracle, which was a database that started out with CIA venture capital funding, basically said they want a massive surveillance state so that everyone, even the police, would be on their best behavior. And, I just wanted to say that when it comes to like Netanyahu's playbook, this is kind of actually really relevant because it's how we do things, how we string along conflicts. It's how we manufacture consent to keep going and keep escalating, keep funding the police, even though, they have an insane budget. Like I was just looking at the national, this is kind of a non sequitur because you were also in the military. Like I'm watching like ICE guys, like ICE agents with Ops Corps helmets now, with better gear than the National Guard, right? Like when I was in Ranger Regiment, the only people who had Ops Corps helmets were Rangers, SEALs, Delta, Green Berets, and Marine Force Reconnaissance, and then Air Force Special Operations. Everyone else had, and now these like grunts, these police have like the same kind of like tactical spec ops gear. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, you still have National Guard soldiers who are literally training with a mix of the digital print gear and the camo print gear.
Yeah. But like ICE.
They're using like gear from the early 2000s because the budgets have been cut so much to even get them with the equipment necessary to train. But yeah, the rise of the significance of, in my perspective, of how everything rolled out with ICE and how that how they're basically kidnapping people off the street is how quickly they were able to do it, how organized our corrupt leadership was, and how quickly they were able to pull in thousands and thousands of men to kidnap people, how American citizens were so willing for the sake of money to go out on the streets and start kidnapping people that were completely innocent, that were going through these due process phases to get their green card, or, they sought asylum, or they were refugees, whatever the case may be. It was how quickly people jumped as American citizens to participate in this.
Well, again, we're so incredibly militarized, and we all need to get away from that. And again, I just wanted to just talk about Netanyahu's playbook because it's the U.S. playbook too. It's this deceptive diplomacy, stringing things along, controlling the narrative, and so basically structurally it's the same playbook. Gaza, Iran, with the police trying to like block federal judges, and now they want to like impeach federal judges who try to block the increasing militarization of ICE and impunity of our law enforcement. Basically, Netanyahu escalates until international pressure builds, right? Then signals openness to a ceasefire to appear reasonable and regain narrative control. We do this, the Trump administration does the same thing. It shifts the burden onto the other side to respond. Even though Israel initiated or intensified the violence in Gaza, he used this tactic repeatedly to appear like the peace-seeking party while maintaining the siege and committing atrocities. The will accept a ceasefire if they propose it. Line is strategic. It lets him frame Iran as the aggressor if they don't respond, even though Israel launched strikes deep into Iranian territory. And what can we do right now to circumvent this strategy that all our politicians are trying to gaslight us with? It's basically to expose the pattern in real time. So you basically want to frame this ceasefire offer as part of the violence, not a break from it, and make it clear that Israel initiated the escalation. The offer is itself for a ceasefire is conditional and manipulative. We already know it. It's a tactic used to deflect pressure, not end harm. So we have to center the people of Iran, center the people of Gaza, center the undocumented people in the United States and Palestine, not regimes or governments, and show how this tactic weaponizes diplomacy to avoid accountability. So none of this is a peace gesture. It's part of the performance that sustains violence. So I don't think like we've lost all diplomatic credibility at this point.
Absolutely.
You know, we were really pushing for this Iran deal. Like we were supposed to have a 6th round of talks. And before that happened, it looks like the Trump administration was lulling the Iranian government into a false sense of security because the talks were coming along. It looked like there was going to be a JCPOA 2.0, and then Israel strikes, you know. And
yeah,
I think
overall we started. I think overall the American people and on an international, like the global, on a global scale, when Trump could not end the Russia-Ukrainian war after all of these diplomatic solutions and Truth Social posts and everything about how that was going to end, I think people really started questioning what kind of diplomatic power does America have anymore. And now we're witnessing it again. But this time we are directly involved. The difference between the war with Ukraine and Russia is, although we are directly involved, we're not anticipating that Russia is going to drop some sort of nuclear bomb on us or on any of our U.S. military bases. That isn't something that they have threatened to do, or it's not a part of their strategy. But we have a country like Iran, who is so close to our military bases throughout the Middle East, who has threatened to bomb our military bases, who has bombed our military bases. And you have Trump, who has no diplomatic power to stop it anymore. And they just keep going back and forth on social media. And we're just like looking like at all these comments, like what is actually happening here? When are we going to have actual leaders that are going to step up and say enough is enough? Because we're watching these theatrics take place, but behind that are actual human beings who are suffering, both in Iran, in the Middle East, in the occupied Israeli territory, in Gaza. There are actual human beings that are suffering, the American people, from these theatrics. And so we have lost diplomacy power. We have, on the international stage, we are looked at as Americans being complicit in genocide.
I think it's more and more like it couldn't happen unless we approved it, you know, because, you know, Israel could not sustain a war at all without our support for more than like 2 weeks. You know, back in in 1973, when they did another round of preemptive strikes, they ran out of munitions within a week, and we had to have one of the largest logistical operations to resupply them in the 70s. Nothing has changed. Israel has no strategic depth, economically, militarily, industrially. So yeah, we got to step in and do it. But it doesn't seem like even after this snub that Netanyahu did against Trump, that anything substantive will change in terms of U.S. foreign policy going forward. I mean, we've been watching this in horror for the past 2 years. You and I, you know, we met right after Aaron Bushnell self-immolated in an act of extreme protest, and ever since then we've just been like, this is degrading our soft and hard power forever. Internationally, we're destroying the rules-based order that the U.S. empire set up after World War II to dominate the globe. So even from like a sociopathic imperial perspective, all of this just looks so self-destructive.
Yeah, you know, earlier today I was actually doing research on historically how many generations does it take for people to, you know, come around to the reality of war and forgiving a country and its people, etc. And historically, it takes between 50 and 100 years. But there are research right now that are saying that because what we are all witnessing has been on social media, has been live streamed, is literally memories implanted into our brains, that this is going to take centuries for us to be able to come out of as an empire, if our empire can even make it that long at this point. So what the damage that our country has done as an American to travel anywhere, I'm going to be viewed as someone who is complicit in the not only a genocide, but we're literally like 2 choices away from a nuclear war. this is humanity. You know, a lot of people don't realize how destructive it is to go for nuclear war. And that is that's the trajectory that we are heading, because nothing is slowing down. Ever since we met, everything has been so quick. If you're not paying attention at least 20 out of 24 hours a day, you really will have no idea what's going on, because the trajectory of death and destruction is moving so quickly. And I think that part is where, as American citizens, it's hard for most of them to process the reality that behind all of these theatrics, behind all of these decisions, there are human lives that are being affected, and the future of our lives are going to be affected. I have 4 children, and one of them, her she has an elective to fly drones. That is not the future that I want for my children. That is not what the American promises and values and morals that we can claim as a country. We can be a country with morals and values, but we have to get out these corrupt politicians in order to do it. Otherwise, we are facing a country where our freedoms are going to be taken, where we are going to be living every day wondering what country is going to invade us, what people are going to come after us, because we have literally caused death and destruction everywhere on this planet.
Yeah, and people are like learning more and more about this, and I keep telling people, especially like people within liberal circles, which I found really challenging to try and get through to people, because they don't seem to understand that whatever our government is willing to do to Palestinians, to Iranians, to Iraqis, to undocumented workers in the United States, they're willing to do to you eventually.
Absolutely.
You know, it'll take time to roll its way up the privilege ladder, but it'll come down to, start with the most vulnerable people, and then it will just end with everybody who disagrees with the state and its feudal, like, oligarch overlords will be on the same chopping block as well. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a merging of the ICE narrative about undocumented workers in conjunction with a crackdown of freedom of speech in the name of combating anti-Semitism happening at the same time.
Yes. I don't think that our government anticipated how many Republicans and conservatives would be against what is happening right now. And to me, that keeps me optimistic that there's an opportunity for people to continue to get educated with the truth and change their mind. And if there's any message that I can ever get out, is that it is okay to change your mind. Because look at me, I come from a Republican MAGA community, and all I needed to do was be educated with the reality of what's going on in order to speak out against it. And I think the more we keep educating the American people with the truth, the more that we have a chance to save this country.
Yeah, and by extension, every other country affected by the violence of the U.S. empire. So, yeah, going forward, and I'm kind of, I think the decline is definitely inevitable. Now we have all the trappings of democracy gone. Our soft power, our diplomacy, as we've discussed, is gone. All we have now is force, sanctions, military intervention, weaponizing the IMF and the World Bank and NATO against upstart countries that want to challenge us. We're no longer an aspirational country to like follow anymore, and that kind of degrades our power projection, beyond the military sphere. We've also cut programs like USAID, which, was another arm of U.S. soft power. Was it completely corrupt? Yeah, it was, but that's how it was supposed to work. So just all of these decisions are degrading the U.S. imperium. And I think the death is inevitable. But one question, and of course that will be so great for so many people around the world, but like now, will we might die as an empire, but will we survive as a polity? That's the real thing I'm wondering, because it just seems like, even though like people should be realizing, hey, the Democrats, Republicans, they're distraction politics. The Republicans, they're really like dogmatic about war. Especially like the neocon or conservative incorporated people. But so are plenty of Democrats. They just phrase it better. You know, their big complaint over, you know, the U.S. striking Iranian nuclear hard sites wasn't that we committed an act of illegal warfare against a sovereign nation in contravention of our own laws. It was, hey, you didn't go through the Senate first, okay? You didn't ask us.
Yeah, you have, you know, Schiff, he just made a public statement saying that he supported what the Trump administration did in bombing these nuclear sites. But what no one is talking about is the fact that this was actually a violation of international law. I watched the Emergency Security Council meeting that at the United Nations yesterday, I think it was, or maybe the day before. And even the countries, the United Nations countries, hardly any of them are talking about the fact that this is a violation of international law to bomb a nuclear site. But there were some countries like Pakistan, they stood up and stood in very bold, complete solidarity with Iran, expressing that they understand that Israel has been, you know, destabilized, and America has been destabilizing their region now for decades, and that this was a violation of international law. But when we can't even come to the table and acknowledge that the choices that our government is making goes against international laws, Geneva Convention, humanitarian laws, then what kind of country are we now? Everything that, all the propaganda that we have been told about North Korea, I have friends and family are wondering, are we like North Korea? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's where we're headed. We're headed to be viewed like you view North Korea. That on an international scale is what is happening to the American people, to the American government. And, you know, I don't see this ending anytime soon because the people have not united enough to stop it. There's so much chaos, there's so much division still within our country that we aren't uniting enough, putting certain differences aside and standing on the ones that we do align with in order to unite together to stop what's happening. Because we, the people, do have more power. It's just taking people to realize that we have to put our differences aside in order to stop this trajectory from heading towards nuclear war. That's the big, the worst case scenario is a nuclear war.
You know, some of these like transhumanist like oligarchs that definitely control our foreign policy. We've already named a lot of them in this episode. What I find kind of crazy is that, especially in MAGA world, like there was all this like starstruck adoration for people like Elon Musk, who's actually the least dangerous of all the tech oligarchs. Very, very much so the least dangerous, which is kind of like he was the face. He was kind of like goofy and autistic, didn't really seem evil. Obviously, he's a white supremacist, and that's, you know, and an anarcho-capitalist. But yeah. I mean, are people still like celebrating like Elon Musk, and do they even know who these other oligarchs are who are within Trump's camp inner circle and are driving policy? It just seems like people like them. There's so many MAGA influencers and thought leaders that support these guys. And from my perspective, it's like, maybe if I support these oligarchs unconditionally, no matter what, one day I'll be really, really rich too.
Absolutely. I mean, they are the conservative side is very strategic about its talking points and propaganda. You know, they get everyone on the same page within the hour to be able to push out these talking points. And the more that these Americans are hearing these same propagandized talking points, the more that they're likely to believe it. And, you know, I follow a lot of these conservative outlets and influencers from my life before October 7th. These were people I followed. This was content I shared. I can't even believe that I shared people like Charlie Kirk. It blows my mind now looking back. I'm like, what was the harm I was causing by sharing content from someone like that? But they are so organized together to be able to publish talking points that they push out all at the same time. And that is how they are able to keep the American people going on this train. So, you know, this situation happened with Elon, but within 24 hours, something else was happening. And they were pushing out all of these talking points. And the American mind just, oh, well, that was yesterday's news. What's today's news? And that's how they keep the American people plugged into this narrative that we are the good guys, that we must, continue to wage war in the Middle East for our freedom. This talking point, it's all about our freedom, all about our freedom. Not one of these countries has attacked us on our soil. The 9/11 attack that was orchestrated with Israel was the last attack that has happened on U.S. soil on a scale of that violence. Yet this is the same narrative that they're using again, and it's 2025. The reality is this isn't true. Our national security is based on our choices that we are making, not necessarily the choices someone else is making. And if we continue to wage death and destruction in the Middle East, across the global South, these conflicts with China regarding Taiwan, the conflicts with Russia regarding the Ukraine, there has to at some point be an expectation or an acceptance that this is going to come to our homeland. And so it is up to the American people to really, up to us to educate the American people to peel back these layers of propaganda that they are hearing every day from these really, really organized conservative influencers.
Right. And the hawks, the true hardened war hawks, like the Lindsey Grahams and the Tom Cotton, senator for Arkansas, who incidentally hasn't done shit for Arkansas. He's just like, more war, send in the police. Yeah, it's send in the troops and send in the police. But they would actually relish a forward adversary attack on American soil.
Absolutely.
They want
Absolutely, because it would validate everything that they've been trying to tell the American people. This is going to happen if we don't do this. But what they don't realize is, I think, the younger generation and having access to social media has really changed a lot of the way the American people think. And although I think this is going to take a longer period of time for us to all realize where we're headed, I think that it is still possible. And of course, I'm not going to give up. And I believe that my country and this country can stand on values that are principled in humanity and not harming other people, both within our own country and other countries. And I think that that's something that we can push politicians to start voting in with legislation that does that more.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely more hopeful in the entire governmental system. I'm not sure voting will do anything. I guess when Peter
Maybe that's
Thiel,
my Christian side.
Yeah, Peter Thiel said, technology was a great alternative to politics because you could just feed people and shunt information to people to control their votes, so voting becomes irrelevant. But and I think we're seeing that within the conservative space. You look at Patriot Takes, Libs of TikTok, Charlie Kirk. They all get the bat signal and they release the same message at the same time.
Absolutely. It's a very, very organized group of people. Their strategy is working. And those are things we need to look at too, as people who are anti-war, who understand the reality. We need to look at those strategies too and say, how can we get the truth out that way as well?
It's interesting. If you study the Vietnam backlash and the resistance to the Vietnam War, how we have lobbies for the military industrial complex, for APAC, CPAC. Well, a bunch of people actually created their own anti-war pack that was out at the end, outperforming the lobbyists from the military industrial complex too. So something to look about. You definitely have, you're better at organization than I am. So maybe think about that coming up with our own.
I know that there are a lot of lobby groups that have been created here in the past 20 months because of what's going on. And I am hopeful. I don't necessarily support this campaign funding of these large lobby groups. I think that there should be laws passed against this, because this is, you get a new lobby group and now, the politicians corrupted with that lobby group. So at the end of the day, we have to have policies in place that don't allow that to happen, that, American people are truly represented by these politicians. And I think that's why they're coming down so hard on Thomas Massie, because I think he is starting to talk about those types of things and wanting to introduce those types of things. And that's why you see President Trump directly attacking him on Truth Social. But the reality is Thomas Massie has represented himself as someone that both the left and the right are supporting. And so that makes him a dangerous candidate for the deep state.
Right. And so I know we have different definitions of what the deep state is.
The oligarchy.
What?
The oligarchy, the elites.
Okay. I thought, okay. So my understanding, and we're kind of running out of time, was like people within the MAGA circle thought like the deep state was like these career bureaucrats in the FBI and CIA that have been around since the Bay of Pigs that were controlling policy as unelected officials. But if you're saying it's the oligarchs, I'm like, cool, that is the deep state. Capitalism is the deep state.
Yeah, because when the people uniting together is what terrifies the elites, because that's when we're really going to be able to make a difference and go against all of, this death and destruction that they've been causing.
Right. And it's not just happening on the political right. It's also happening within this New York mayoral race with Zohran Mamdani against Andrew Cuomo. The establishment Dems are fighting so hard to get out a populist socialist that, wants to make life affordable for people. They even had like the arch neoliberal himself, Bill Clinton, come out of hiding to be like, you need to vote for a fellow, sex offender, like sex pest.
Yes, they are pulling all the stops because I think that they are genuinely concerned that he has a chance of winning. And I think that he has a chance of winning too. And if he wins, this will show the American people that we do have the power to put someone in office that is going to represent the American people. So I say vote for Zohran. Zohran.
Yeah,
Zohran.
Okay.
Vote for Zohran. I'm not in New York, but vote for Zohran.
Yeah, the news cycle has been so insane that we've been all over the place with this episode, but I just hope like that it was very freeform to show you that literally all of this, Iran, Palestine, the New York mayoral race, the creation of Kentucky PAC to overthrow Thomas Massey, the militarization of ICE, it's all connected in one single struggle. So
absolutely.
And if you want the genocide in Palestine to stop, that means being involved in local politics here. It just does. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. I'm sorry. I thought that was a really solid session. We covered a lot, and hopefully it just illustrates to people like how all these things are connected. Josephine Guilbeau, former U.S. military intelligence analyst, now at the Eisenhower Media Network. Thank you so much for coming on, as always, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. And we'll see you, I think, Thursday here at State of Play, because we are back to 2 episodes a week, baby. So cheers, y'all, and try to stay sane out there and like have hobbies and meet up with your communities and social groups. Pool. Yeah, go to the pool before they get defunded. Cheers, y'all.